Dear students, welcome to the video lecture of Corolarry 6, Design with Inheritance. So this is very important corollary. So how we handle the inheritance. So generally, especially the multiple inheritance is creating a lot of complexities while implementing it. So how we are going to handle it, how we are going to tackle it is the important discussion of the Corollary 6, design with inheritance. So inheritance is an important concept. Inheritance promote the reusability. The subclass inherit from the superclass. So the all are good and fine. But only thing is what are the complexities in it and how to handle the complexity is very important, especially for the multiple inheritance. So design Corollary 6, design with inheritance. While implementing a class, it is essential to determine its ancestors and superclasses, what attributes it will have and what message it will understand. Then construct the methods and protocols according to that. Choose the inheritance to minimize the amount of program instruction. The class inherit from some other class, it will minimize the amount of program instruction. So when implementing a class, it is essential to determine its ancestors, what attribute it will have and what message it will understand, then construct the methods and protocols. Choose the inheritance to minimize the amount of program instruction. Example, when developing an application for the government that manages the licensing procedure for a variety of regulated entities. So when developing application of government that manages the licensing procedure for the regulated entities, let us focus on two types of entities. One is motor vehicle, another one is restaurants. Motor vehicle and restaurants are the two type of entities. See the diagram. For example, restaurant is a one entity, motor vehicle is the another entity. Okay, this is for licensing procedure. License the application deal with the licensing of the government agencies. So motor vehicle is contained two subclasses. One is private vehicle and commercial vehicle. So restaurant itself giving it is a this will handle the giving licensing to the various type of restaurants. Absolutely no problem. So a situation occurs. The class is not very the class is not very reusable, but extra code is localized, allowing simpler debugging and enhancement. Okay, the class is not very reusable. The classes are not very reusable, but extra code is localized, allowing a simpler debugging and enhancement. So now we are in the concept of the multiple inheritance. So licensing, in the licensing procedure, on license will be given to the food truck. On the other hand, if the internet language supports the multiple inheritance, you can decide the specialized classes, food truck, especially dual ancestry, commercial vehicle, and the restaurants. So we are having a class. That class name is called food truck. The food truck, which contain it is a contain properties of commercial vehicle and restaurant also. So we can say that it is a moving restaurant. So in this condition, what happened? The food truck will have two ancestors. One is commercial vehicle, another one is restaurants. This leads to the multiple inheritance. So issues of the multiple inheritance. So what are the issues in the multiple inheritance? Problem occurs if both the ancestors having a methods and attributes in the same name. If the commercial vehicle and restaurant having some attributes and methods, they are the same name, will have a problem. The language supports the multiple inheritance. Handle these hits by giving a precedence to the first ancestor defined. So what will happen if a commercial vehicle or restaurant, if the first answer defines commercial vehicle, for the attribute and method, it will give a commercial vehicle and the attribute name, commercial vehicle and method name. This is the one way to handle it. So using the mechanism, a rework is required in the food truck descendant and quietly possibly in each ancestor. So what will happen? We have to make some rework in the food truck descendant and as well as in the ancestor. This is a complicated process. Doing a rework is a complicated process. The difficulties in maintaining such a design increases geometrically with the number of ancestors assigned to given class. The difficulties in maintaining such a design increases geometrically with the number of ancestors assigned to the given class. So this is the problem in the multiple inheritance. So how to handle this? How to handle this? Achieving the multiple inheritance using a single inheritance approach is the only solution. Achieving a multiple inheritance with the help of the single inheritance is the only solution. One advantage of using a single inheritance hierarchy is the absence of the ambiguity as to how the object will respond to a given message. Okay, it's reduce single inheritance, eliminate the ambiguity. Multiple inheritance bring it with some complications such as how to determine which behavior to get from which classes. This is a general ambiguity of the multiple inheritance. So bring the complications, how to determine which behavior to get from which classes. Particularly, several ancestors define the same method. That is a problem. Several ancestors are defining a same method. Okay, then we have to determine which behavior to get from which class is a very complicated one. One way of achieving the benefits of a multiple inheritance in a language with a single inheritance is to inherit from the most appropriate class. Inherit from the most appropriate class and add an object of another class as an attribute or aggregation. So inherit from the more appropriate class and add an object of another class as an attribute or an aggregation as a part of another class. So if you have two ancestors, you will inherit from the most significant ancestor and make others as an attribute of the class or aggregation, part of relationship of a class. So see this example here, the food truck, it is having only one ancestor. You can say immediate ancestor is a commercial vehicle, and restaurant are made as a part of the food truck. So this is the solution for the multiple inheritance problem. Avoid inheriting the inappropriate behaviors. Beginners in the object-oriented system frequently error by designing a subclass that inherit from the inappropriate superclasses. Generally, a common mistake are carried out by the designers. We can say beginners. Okay, they frequently error by designing subclass that inherit from the inappropriate superclass. Before the class inherits, ask the following question: is the subclass fundamentally similar to its superclass? I inheritance coupling. If subclass fundamentally similar to its superclass, I inheritance coupling, or is it entirely a new thing that simply wants to borrow some expertise from its superclass? You have to ask the question: the subclass is similar to a superclass, or a subclass is a new thing that entirely borrow from its superclass? Okay, if the second answer, then you have to design the inheritance, not for the first. If subclass fundamentally similar to the superclass, then no need for a inheritance there. Often you should find the latter is true. You should add an attribute that incorporates the proposed superclass behavior. Often you will find the latter is true. You should add an attribute. Often find latter is true. You should add an attribute that incorporates the proposed superclass behavior rather than inherit from the superclass. This is because the inheritor of a class must intimate with all the implementation detail, and if some implementation is inappropriate, because the inheritor of the class must intimate with all the implementation detail, and if some implementation is inappropriate also. The better approach for the example is discussed here is inherit only from the commercial vehicle, and we will have an attribute of the type restaurant. That is the solution for this problem. Okay, the food truck is having a inherit from the commercial vehicle. It's the most relevant superclass, and as well as restaurant is made as an attribute of the food truck class. Okay, that is the Corolarry 6 we discussed. That is the Corolarry 6, designing with the inheritance. Okay, thanks for watching the video. Thank you.